It's not that one death is more or less important than others, but I think there were 5 members of the church who died in the hurricanes. I think that's what the Christian Chronicle article said, 5. There was a family of 3, a husband and a wife and a small child that were killed. There was another member. And then there was a youth minister in one of the congregations that their toddler and infant were both missing. They did find, I think, the infant, but the other one they found dead. And so there's a lot of hurt. How many people now that have died? 25 or so that have died in the tornadoes in Tennessee. So we want to be sure and remember them in our prayers as they go through that suffering. And still have people suffering from the flu. Johnny and Leslie are really struggling with the flu and the coughing and everything that goes along with that. So continue to remember the people who are suffering. Thank you for being here during this series. I thought tonight might be the last night, then I realized there's one more topic at the end of his book that's the most important one, and that is helping children with their spiritual growth. It'd be kind of a waste to do all these other things without dealing with how we can help our children grow spiritually. And so next week, Lord willing, we will take a look at that concept of helping our children grow spiritually. Today I want to continue with the discussion about discipline. All children need love. All of us need love. But all children need love. The way they seek it is immature and irrational. This is going to come as a surprise to you, but the younger a child is, the more immature they are. It's a revelation. You learned something tonight, didn't you, that you didn't know? The younger a child is, the more immature they are. So don't expect little children to respond and act in a mature, rational way. Even adults don't act in a mature, rational way. Don't expect a little child to do that. What would you say would be a rational way to obtain love? Boy meets girl, girl meets boy. And how would they go about getting that other person to love them? Be lovable themselves. What would that involve?
I'm sorry, what did you say, Tracy?
Be lovable. If you want somebody to love you, be lovable.
I think you could look at the old do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah. And that's especially true in a relationship like that. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Would they be whining and pouting and arguing and demanding? If you were trying to attract somebody, would that be how you would act? No, you would act maturely. How do children seek an answer to the question, do you love me? With misbehavior, with whining and pouting and arguing and demanding. And so the childish way to obtain love is very demanding. They constantly want to be reassured that they have love, that they want to have that question answered, do you love me? And you may have answered it 100 times, but they still want that question answered to reassure them that they are loved. And so they constantly test our love by their behavior. They don't have the communication skills to rationally express, I'm not sure whether you love me or not, and so let's see how we can rationally figure out whether you love me or not. They don't have that skill, and so they ask us if we love them by their behavior, and that behavior is not always the best. And so instead of winning our love with affection through good behavior, that child continually tests our loved by their behavior. Now, misbehavior shouldn't be condoned. This does not mean that we should be permissive and condone misbehavior, but problems may result if it's handled in an inappropriate way, either too harshly or too permissively. And we'll see a little bit more of that later on, but it need to be handled and dealt with in an appropriate way. When a child is misbehaving, we need to ask ourselves, what does this child need? Maybe they need some of the things we've talked about. Do they need eye contact? Do they need physical contact? Do they need focused attention? Or is there some physical problem that might cause the child to act the way they are? Might the child be misbehaving because they're hungry?
That's probably where the word angry comes from, huh?
Angry is hungry, just part of hungry, just hangry, yeah, that's exactly right. Hangry is, I'm angry because I'm hungry. See, even adults do that. Even adults get cranky. Imagine if you cannot communicate. And so you would say, okay, kid, you're misbehaving, straighten up. Or you might give them something to eat. Have you ever found yourself being grumpy when you're tired? Well, children might get grumpy when they're tired too. They may need a nap. They may not want to take the nap, and they may fight it, but that may be why they're grumpy, is because they're tired. Or, you know, it might be that they're ill, they're sick. Do you feel great when you're sick? Yeah, you get kind of grumpy. And so,
Does stress come under tired, do you think?
well, no, but I think you could probably add some other things to this. I think stress would be another one. And children probably experience stress that we don't relate to. You know, there might be something that creates stress in a child's life that that wouldn't, or worry. And you know, if a child is worrying about whether they're loved or not, but even there might be other things in their life that cause them to worry. He gives some examples. Their older daughter was gone to camp, and so they have two sons, and the older son was the big child in the house, and he was taking on responsibility and doing all these things. And then the daughter came back from camp, and so what did that son do? He started misbehaving. He started acting up because of the stress. Yeah, he had been stuck back in another situation. He tells about when he was gone on a trip to do a seminar somewhere, and he comes back, and the youngest son is just misbehaving. Well, he's stressed out because his father's been gone, and he has all these new questions about, you know, is he going to be gone again, and all the things that would come up. And so stress would be another thing that would cause a child to misbehave. It's not because they're being naughty, it's because they're in a stressful situation. And so we need to ask ourselves, is there a reason, a physical reason for this misbehavior? He also suggests that we need to learn to forgive. If a child is genuinely sorry, then we need to learn to forgive that child. Punishment in that case might have a negative result. The focus is on the word genuinely sorry. And he has a couple of reasons. One is that if a child is really, really sorry, it helps them develop a healthy conscience to express that and be rewarded for it. And he also suggests that if they're really, really sorry and they're punished anyway, that it might create anger. because you're not understanding them. Again, he never recommends permissive behavior, allowing them to get away with something, but it deals with, it's how you deal with something. If you look in, did I show you that one yet? No. Okay. Okay, the worst time to punish a child when that child is genuinely sorry for what he has done. This healthy conscience is the best deterrent to repeated misbehavior. Corporal punishment may remove the feeling of remorse and guilt, and punishment may produce feelings of anger.
And what? Conscious?
Which one?
What conscience?
Okay, I'm only a couple of slides behind.
That's okay.
It's a healthy conscience is best deterrent. I don't totally agree with him here. I think there are times when a child receives a spanking and they're relieved that it's over, and then they can go on with their business. And they may say, you didn't do it right. And say, wait till I come back with my blanket, and then you can do it right. And so there are times when there's a finality of that. It's over with, it's done, you can put it behind you. And I think kids as well as adults realize that sometimes there are consequences for what you do. And so I don't know that this is totally true 100% of the time. I don't know that it necessarily deters the development of a good conscience.
Does it depend on the situation?
And we'll talk about that in just a second, but I think it depends a lot on the situation. And then the second one is that punishment may produce feelings of anger. And there again, it depends on how it's done and when it's done. One passage he suggests to guide us is Psalm 103:13. Psalm 103:13. And Greg, you have that one right there?
As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him.
And so if you turn that around, as a father has compassion on his children, so God has compassion on you. As God has compassion on you, so a father has compassion on his children. And so that's where that, depending on the situation, but being guided by compassion and using God as an example. And I think if you go through the Old Testament, there was a lot of punishment that took place and a lot of things that happened, but it was always driven by love and compassion on God's part. And so he's a good guide. And that also fits in with what we're familiar with in Ephesians 6:4 about fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the wisdom and admonition of the Lord. Now, we need to understand that a child who claims to be sorry but is not is learning to be insincere and dishonest and calculating and manipulative and insensitive. And I suspect you're pretty good at judging that. What would be a clue that the child is being manipulative? It's what? If they keep doing it, oh, I'm so sorry. And then about 10 minutes later, oh, I'm so sorry, I won't ever do that again. And so if they keep doing it, that's a pretty good clue that they're using the system.
Sometimes you get little smirks on their faces.
Yeah, you can tell a lot by looking at their face. And so we need to be aware of the danger of developing children that have this kind of attitude, because that's pretty destructive as you go through life, to have that kind of foundation where you're manipulative and insincere.
They're crying their eyes out except there's no tears.
Yeah, their eyes are just dry as they can be. And sometimes they might be able to work up some tears too, if they've had enough practice. There are different forms of discipline that he discusses. And the first one is a direct request. And that's where you ask the child to do something. And he suggests that it gives a sense of personal responsibility to the children. He gives a couple of examples. One time he's in the bathtub and forgot to get a towel, and his young son was walking by, and he said, would you go down and get your daddy a towel, please? And he was happy to do that. Little things like that help build over time as they feel a sense of responsibility. Another one, probably a little bit more to the point, he found out from his older son's teacher that there were some boys that were acting up in class, and he wavered between telling them to behave and telling his son, you better behave. And instead, he chose the second option. He said, I want you to pay attention to the teacher, join in the discussions, and learn all you can. Will you do that? And so he turned it into a request, a positive request. And if that works, then it helps build a better attitude. And others by direct instruction. If that doesn't work, if they don't pick up on the asking them to, then you tell them to. It is direct instruction. And this happens maybe when you make a request and they just don't do it. And so sometimes you have to say, okay, I want you to do this. And sometimes along with that, you have to give gentle physical manipulation. You take them by the hand, you put your arm on their shoulder, and you just kind of direct them where you want them to go. And so you might have to reinforce that a little bit with just take them by the hand and lead them, or put your arm on them and just direct them where you want to go. And then also, we need to respond correctly to defiance, and that's when they are openly resisting and challenging authority, and there's no way that it can be permitted. And so in that case, you may need to take other steps. It may take a spanking. It may take a timeout. And he talks about some more of those things. The punishment must fit the offense. In doing this, we need to make sure that we are consistent. We've talked before about the worst thing that you can do to a child is be inconsistent. Children want and need boundaries. They need to know what the limits are. And then you need to be flexible. Now, how do you do both? How do those two fit together? How can you be consistent and flexible?
Well, you're consistent in your expectations, but you're flexible in the way maybe they get it done.
Yeah, good. That you're consistent in your expectations. You can be flexible in how it's done or how that you respond.
Being like if I like when I, as a kid when I was asked to do the dishes, it didn't matter how I did it as long as I did it.
Yeah. You just need to be reasonable, and the child needs to know that needs to know these are the boundaries, but they need to know that you are reasonable with them. And if there's a reasonable explanation for what's happened, then you're willing to make adjustments. He talks a little bit about behavior modification. Does anybody know what behavior modification is? Behavior modification involves either giving a reward for something, withdrawing something positive from the child, or sometimes punishment having a negative commodity. The positive reinforcement would be like, if you do so-and-so, I'll give you a piece of candy. If you don't do so-and-so, then I won't give you, I withhold what you'll lose 30 minutes of television, or you'll lose something or other. And the punishment part is just grab them by the right here and just squeeze. And I agree with him. There are some positives and negatives of behavior modification. It was really big in education several years ago. And fortunately, I don't think quite so much anymore. These behavior modification techniques cannot replace emotional nurturing. And they don't really convey unconditional love because they're so mechanical. It's, cut and dried. You do this, you get a piece of candy. You don't do that, you lose 30 minutes of TV. And it's, there's no unconditional love in that. It's a mechanical thing. And it may actually result in an inappropriate value system. Many years ago, when this was new in education, I read a study in Psychology Today. And what they had found in studying classrooms where they did this, there are two ways that were motivated, either internally or externally. People who are internally motivated do things just because they want to. It's the right thing to do. I want to do this. Externally motivated people, what's in it for me? And the only thing that this accomplished, it didn't change externally motivated people at all, but it changed internally motivated people to become externally motivated. And so it was not a good result, because it took people who were motivated to do things just because they wanted to do it, and it taught them, I'll do it if you give me something, and otherwise I won't do it. And that's one of the dangers, I think, of that kind of behavior modification.
They also talk about how, eventually it gets to the point where they're like, you're just going to give me that, so stickers, for example, they're like, only one,
Yeah.
That's worthless.
Exactly. It's like, that's all you're going to give me? Yeah. It always has to escalate, so you're right. And that's another problem. And one other problem is they may learn to use it on you. If you do this, then I'll do that.
That's called
Negotiation skills. If you don't do that, then I'm not going to do this. You did it on them. Why is it not right for them to do it on you?
Right.
And so that is a danger. There are so many resources in child discipline, and they cover a wide gamut, but I put some of them up on the table here. Some of them are fairly old, but they're still good. Burkina and Faulkner did a book called What Every Family Needs, or Whatever Happened to Mom, Dad, and the Kids. Royce Money, another member of the church, wrote a book called Building Stronger Families. There is maybe a little more recent technique called PET, Parent Effectiveness Training. James Dobson has written tons of books, and if you go online to Focus on the Family, and you can find a lot of good books. One of them is called Dare to Discipline, Strong-Willed Child, and Love Must Be Tough. And another one that's used some in education is called the Boys Town model. Boys Town has developed over many years discipline ways, and here are their philosophies: to parent with patience and love, use positive discipline, praise children for the good things they do, protect children and teach them how to protect themselves, prepare children for real-life situations, teach children to solve problems on their own, use parenting strategies that fit a child's age and developmental level, and help children develop and grow a strong spiritual foundation and moral compass. And they use 4 components: effective praise, preventative teaching, corrective teaching, and teaching self-control. Now, they're real big on teaching social skills. For example, when you meet someone, you look them in the eye, you shake their hand firmly, and you say, "My name is so-and-so," or how do you do? And they have a whole procedure. Some of these, the Boys Town and the Love and Logic. Did I mention Love and Logic? Love and Logic is a really good one. It's based on choices. You know, the punishment's going to, would you choose this or that? It's not choose if you're going to be punished, but you can choose this or that. And this Boys Town does some of that, where they've just clearly outlined consequences. If you do this, then this. And so the Boys Town model and the Love and Logic model are good along that line. You're welcome to look at these books up here if you want to later on after class. Along that line, we did buy one copy of all the materials that Steve had, and they're in the library with cards in them. He also sold us all the remaining DVDs at his cost. And so we have DVDs on